Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining tonight. I'm excited to share a little bit about, how delaying smartphones can help kids flourish and talk a little about some of the impact we've seen early smartphone use and social media has had on a generation and why it's time for us to start to shift these norms. So to give you a bit of background on myself, my name's Jenna. I am a mom of two young kids. I spent my last 20 years working in tech, whether that was working at BlackBerry, one of the first smartphones. I spent almost 10 years building products to actually flag and remove harmful content from social media. I've built AI products, mobile products, and even have experience with online identification verification that's required for Canadian legislation. And so I deeply understand the benefits that technology can bring, but I also understand how these products are built to be addictive and the kind of harmful content that proliferates on these platforms. And so I'm a parent volunteer with Unplug Canada. Myself and a few others, co-founded the Nova Scotia chapter back in October 2024. And it's been incredible to see this conversation shift over the last year and a half, and really start to become at the forefront of many parents' minds. So over the last 10 years, the last decade, this has really been one of the largest unregulated clinical trials that we've ever run. And so we're seeing folks like Dr. Charlotte Moore Hepburn from Sick Kids start to really speak up about the digital harms that these children are facing, whether it's taking advantage of their vulnerabilities, compulsive use, diminishing self-worth, and really understanding that regulation on these platforms is really necessary to keep kids safer online. And when we look back in the last 2 decades, everything's changed. Back in 2006, Nokia ruled. It was largely a talk and text device. It was in 2007 with the iPhone launch and 2008 with the App Store opening that these devices really started to shift. They became supercomputers in our pocket. And with the launch of Instagram in 2010, this started the selfie culture and the influencer economy. In 2011, 4G launched across Canada, enabling internet everywhere. And in 2017, TikTok launched in Canada, and this is really the proliferation of these short form videos that really are highly addictive, and they're the fracturing of attention right now. To where we are today, where unfortunately 87% of Canadian 12-year-olds have a smartphone. But in this time, not only did technology change, but childhood changed. We went from this play-based childhood that many of us grew up with to really this phone-based childhood where the device has become the center of kids' lives and it's becoming earlier and earlier. And we went from starting to overprotect in the real world, being worried about abductions and safety outside, stranger danger, to really underprotecting in the online world. And so when you really look at the likelihood of something happening to your child in the real world, you'd really have to have your child sit outside unsupervised for an average 750,000 years before they could be guaranteed to be snapped from a stranger. And yet, this quote from the FBI supervisor special agent, kid who's alone in the room with an iPad or an iPhone is at much greater risk than the kid who's just down the street playing at the park. And when children first started getting into these smartphones a decade ago, there was no impact, no research on the impact. But now there is, and it's really overwhelming. And so we have quite a bit of data now that we really just can't ignore. In 2010 to 2012, when smartphones became the center of kids' lives, we started to see this pretty clear inflection point. Teen depression, anxiety, and self-harm doubled, if not tripled. Youth sleep down is down now 1 to 2 hours a night, which is super critical for development. And real world play is down 40%. And global PISA math and reading scores, which have been tracked and increasing for decades, started declining dramatically since 2010. And now we're at a point where 90% of Canadian teens are online daily, spending 7 to 9 hours, and 50% of them say that social media makes them feel worse about themselves. And the physical effects can be lifelong. Myopia, which is short-sightedness, cases have risen 3 times, with 1 in 3 now kids in recent years having short-sightedness due to the increased screen time. 55% of 9 to 17-year-olds have reported neck pain or aches due to screen time, resulting in that tech neck. And only 21% of Canadian 12 to 17-year-olds are getting the recommended physical activity, which is down from 36 in just 2019. And smartphones are exposing kids to predators. In Canada in 2024, there were over 30,000 reported cases of online child exploitation, sexual exploitation, and that's only the reported cases. 90% of girls and 50% of boys say they are sent unwanted explicit content. 65% of teen users have been targeted by sexual offenders. And now children are being groomed and sexually abused by AI chatbots. And these are just some of the headlines here in Canada over the last year. Some very close to home, like the girl who was targeted by predators in her school-issued laptop, or the youth that was arrested here in Halifax for connection with the online violent extremist group, the 769 network, 764 network. And we're starting to see, kids who are being kidnapped in person from a predator that they met online. And so these risks are absolutely real, and they're here in our backyard. And so there's additional five foundational harms that Jonathan Haidt speaks to in his book, The Anxious Generation. And the one that he's most concerned about is the attention fragmentation. The disruption of focus and attention spans make it harder to deeply engage with tasks or real-world interactions. Sleep deprivation, devices encourage late night use and emit blue light, suppressing melatonin production, delaying sleep onset in kids. Social deprivation. Social media fosters unhealthy comparisons and actually amplifies the feelings of inadequacy, leading to increased loneliness. And behavior addiction. Designed to capture attention and keep it, it exploits the brain's reward system, creating dependency and irritability when separated from devices. And the opportunity costs. Devices have replaced opportunities for free play and independent activities crucial for healthy development and emotional development. And this can equate to years wasted on a screen. Canadian teens, again, are spending 7 to 9 hours a day on their phone, and that equals decades of time. I don't think anyone wants to look back on their life and realize that they spent decades staring at a screen. And so this equates to imagining your childhood with 50% less outdoor time, 90% less time looking out the window in a car, 50% less books that you would have read, and 80% less time laughing with friends in person. So I'm going to show this video here, and it's from Smartphone Free Childhood, and it gives you a window into what we expect from kids when we hand them over a device, which just truly isn't fair.
Hey, kiddo, it's about time for bed, okay?
Okay.
Well, remember, there's a box in the corner over there with all the pornographic material that's ever been made in the world, even the really weird stuff that could scar you for life. I'm trusting you not to look in there, okay?
Okay.
Feelings are for losers.
Oh, and this guy's gonna be in your corner all night just randomly spewing out hateful things. Just ignore him, okay? While I'm thinking of it, there's an order form on your desk where you can purchase illegal drugs. The mean girls from your school are gonna be standing there talking about you all night. And this Russian hacker's gonna keep asking for your password.
I'm not hacker. Amazon customer service.
Just need you to ignore him, okay? Love you, buddy.
We ask too much of our kids when we give them a smartphone. Let's change the norm. Together.
Maybe we go around the room and share social security numbers.
Join the movement at smartphonefreechildhoodus.com.
I'll get it anyway.
But the tide is turning on this. In 2024, we had new research emerge with the anxious generation coming out and creating a global sensation with parents. Cell phone policies began to be enacted in Nova Scotia and across Canada and around the world to start to restrict them, at least inside classrooms. And in 2025, new legislation was enacted with Australia becoming the world first to have an age minimum of 16, and Quebec being the first province to actually have a true bell-to-bell policy all the way up to high school. And there's been more resources for parents. A book like 10 Rules for Raising Kids in a High-Tech World by Jean Twang, as well as The Amazing Generation by Jonathan Haidt and Catherine Price, which is a version of the anxious generation that's targeted for kids in grades 4 to 8 and really helps explain in their language what these devices do to their relationships, to their attention, and how they can fight back against this. Well, here we are in 2026, where it's being deemed as the year we go analog, being led much by the Generation Z. Generation Z is wanting to move back to more offline and device-free environments and taking back more of their time. And we've got a global wave of legislation that's starting to come out with more countries following Australia's lead, and we hope that Canada will be doing the same soon. So, what can we do to change this? Jonathan Haidt put forward 4 new norms that he shared that would help us shift this in society. No smartphones before high school, no social media before 16, phone-free schools, bell to bell, more independent free play and responsibility in the real world. And Jean Twang, who's also a renowned social psychologist, has the 10 rules for raising kids in a high-tech world that gives a number of additional practical strategies and recommendations that build on those 4 norms. And I'm going to share much of that tonight. So why do we need some of these rules? Really, there's no seatbelts for parents to click. There's no helmets to snap in place. No assurance that trusted experts have investigated and ensured these platforms are safe for our kids. This is a quote from the US Surgeon General in 2024. And so the first thing we can do as parents is delay smartphones until high school. The first phone should be a basic one. Smartphones are experience blockers. The first phone should be basic and only talk and text. And these flip phones are really coming back. Again, many even Gen Zs are trading in or getting another phone that is a flip phone so they can actually put it away and have just the ability to communicate when they need to, but be able to put aside these devices that become the center of their lives. And if you can, delay giving a device of their own. So have like a family flip phone or some kind of phone that they can borrow at first. Because as soon as you give a child a device, it changes the psychology. So just providing them access gives them that opportunity to have something if they go on a sleepover or go to the park or away from you for a bit, but it doesn't have to be their device and it doesn't have to be something that they have all the time. And so there's a number of smartphone alternatives that parents now can consider before handing over their kid their old iPhone. The landline is coming back. We got one of these for our kids, and it's been amazing to see them create some independence in giving their friends a call, calling their grandparents, learning phone etiquette. And there's a lot more economical options these days with Sfongo, which is a Canadian company. For $5 a month, you can have the phone line, and you can pick up a phone for $20 at Canadian Tire. Music. I think a lot of people are hoping that Apple will bring back the iPod, but for now there is a really neat device called the Mighty 3. You can sync your Spotify and Amazon playlist, and kids can have multiple playlists on here. They can Bluetooth sync it to their car, to headset, have wired headsets, and they can again have some independence in music and listening to music without being tied to a screen. If you have a kid coming off the bus on their own and they're going home and you want to make sure they get there every day, there are some ways in which you can keep an eye on where they are located. There are things like, you know, GPS tracking tags. And digital cameras are coming back. Kids love to take pictures, and that's another way where you can give them that opportunity to capture the moment without it being on a smartphone. And basic watches. If you're considering again, as they get into those preteen years, something that can allow them to send basic messages or voice messages, again, that GPS location and a little bit of health metrics, something like the Garmin watch is a great option. The only thing to consider is one, look for a watch that's truly built for parents and kids in mind that allows you to control when it can be turned off, what it can have access to, because a watch is typically worn 24/7. So you want to make sure you can turn it off during the school day. You want to make sure you can turn it off at night to limit that distraction. And there's an interesting device called the Kari, which is out of the UK, but it's available globally. And it's a GPS-enabled messenger where, again, you can send these little voice notes without it being tied to a screen. So as kids turn to that 14 plus and you want to give them something that they can have a bit more independence with, again, the flip phone's a great starting option. There are other options like the Grow Electronics, the Pinwheel, and the B Connect, which are all technically smartphones, but they have a custom operating system that does not allow it to have a browser, social media, or any of the harmful apps that are not meant for kids. So they can have the tools like music, GPS, and email, but they can't have access to some of those addictive and harmful products, which is different than just giving them their iPhone, your old iPhone. And so when you do consider giving your child a smartphone, wait until they are at least 16 and ideally hand it with a driver's license. At 16, kids develop better critical thinking and impulse control and decision making. There's a reason why we have 16 as the minimum age for driving. And the driver's license means they have more opportunities to see friends in person. And so gives them that incentive to get that driver's license and create that independence. Less kids are getting their license at this point, and that's something we need to, ensure that they continue to strive for. And I can guarantee you that no parent has regretted waiting, but many regret giving a smartphone too soon. And this book here is The Family Smartphone Guide, which I'll call out. It's a Canadian author, and it's written like a driver's ed manual. So when you are getting to a point where your child is going to have a smartphone, this is a really great tool to educate them again at that sort of, more high school level of what they need to be aware of what they could encounter, why it's important they set boundaries on technology, and the benefits they can have by keeping safe, healthy habits. And so to share a little bit more about Unplugged Canada, really our core mission is to help raise awareness about the risks associated with early smartphone and social media use among youth, and to create this supportive community of families who are choosing to delay smartphones and social media use, which reduces the pressure and isolation that can often be felt when making this decision. And the reason why we're all in this is because this is a collective action problem. Everyone has one because everyone has one. So the only way out of this collective action problem is a collective active solution. So we all need to come together to start to shift these norms. So less kids feel left out, more feel empowered to delay, and more will shift towards seeing the benefits of that. And so Unplug Canada has our pledge to delay. So on our website, unplugcanada.com, there's an online form which you can sign to sort of commit to delaying smartphones until at least 14. And we have some sort of live dashboards that do not share any personal information. It just shares the total number of people who have signed, and it's organized by province, by school, and by grade. And so you can see how many in your community are also committing to delay, and it instantly starts to create that community of support. And so once 5 families have signed, the pledge becomes active, and those parents are able to connect. And this is a similar approach we've seen in other countries. Wait Until Life is one of the longest ones around. They've got more than 130,000 families who have delayed smartphones. Smartphone Free Childhood is probably one of the most, I feel like, famous ones that they did an amazing job on their marketing and awareness campaigns. They have over 180,000 parents who have signed. And WaitMate from Australia, they are similar size to Canada, and they have 15,000 pledges to delay. And just to be clear, this is not anti-tech, but pro-childhood. This isn't about delaying technology completely, because technology can have immense benefits, and young people should be able to enjoy the opportunities that it creates, but when they're ready and when it's safe to do so. But childhood is precious and fleeting, and all children should have the opportunity to learn, develop, and grow free from the addictive by design algorithms and age-inappropriate content of social media and smartphones. And if we all agree giving our kids smartphones and instead give them simple phones until high school, then the peer pressure instantly reduces. Saying no can feel impossible when you're acting alone, but acting collectively makes it infinitely easier. And this is going to be a phased approach. Today, almost by the time they're in grade 4 to 6, the majority of class has a smartphone because everybody else has one. But we're starting to see this shift happen where ideally in the coming years, it'll be more of the norm that kids won't get them till they're into high school. And we're starting to see this here in Nova Scotia. So we're closing in on 400 pledges across Nova Scotia in 80 schools. And in my son's class in grade 1, this is 12 families who have signed in his French immersion class. And that is about 30% of the class. And that is extremely empowering as a parent to know that you have a community around you who are also concerned about this and are pledging to delay. And there's some amazing momentum going on in Ontario right now with some schools. This school here in particular has 45% of the school and two-thirds of some classes have pledged delay. Could you imagine if every school in Nova Scotia and across Canada had that? How how much the culture would shift on this and how much more empowered parents and kids would feel. The next thing to consider is delaying social media until at least 16. By law, we protect kids under 16 from just about everything adult in the physical world because we know they're not ready for it. And they're not ready for social media. These products were not built with kids in mind. And so, waiting until kids are beyond middle school when puberty and awkwardness is at its peak is important. And if you do eventually give them an account, I'd recommend you create an account as their age and see for yourself the kind of content that they're going to get served. Do this for a few days or even a week or more because you will get an understanding as to the kind of content that kids get pushed. Because 90% of girls who use social media see themselves negatively and feel dissatisfied with their lives. And after searching one video on disordered eating, 70% of YouTube's recommended content becomes harmful. And one in three considered ending their lives as a result of comparing themselves with others on social media. And 86% of sextortion victims are male, and 70% are boys between 13 and 25. And unfortunately, the list goes on. You know, the risk of self-harm and suicide content, child luring, these AI chatbots, radicalization, the privacy and data loss collection, all of this continues to mount on these platforms, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Snapchat, even some of the gaming platforms. And so parents really need to be aware that, the impact on boys and girls can be a little bit different. There's a lot of focus have been on, for the number of years on girls and the impact because it creates body image issues and eating disorders. It's very performative and there's a lot of social comparison. Girls tend to do a lot more relational aggression versus physical aggression, and so it creates a lot of social drama online. And they tend to be unfortunate victims of sexual harassment and unwanted attention, and this results in poor mental health outcomes of anxiety, loneliness, and self-harm. Why in boys, there's a lot more focus on this lately because we're seeing a lot of toxic masculinity and performance pressure, look maxing and appearance anxiety, incel and misogyny ecosystems. And then unfortunately, they are a major target for sextortion. And this also then results in a lot of aggression, withdrawal, and radicalization. And so there's a number of apps that parents really need to be aware of, not just social media. It's anything really that has messaging, which could be gaming platforms, AI chatbots. And so we've put together some really helpful resources for parents. You can scan that QR code there or go to our website at unplugcanada.com and you can download a really detailed version of this that really explains to parents what each of these platforms are, what to be aware of, and how they're built to be addictive, and what harmful content proliferates. And a lot more folks who have worked in these tech companies are coming forward as whistleblowers. This is a quote from the former director of monetization at Meta. We took a page from Big Tobacco's playbook, working to make our offering addictive at the outset. And it's clear that what we built has caused harm to an entire generation. And so, if you're not following along right now, there's some really landmark trials that are going on against these social media companies right now. There's a mega case in California with hundreds of school districts, families, and public entities across the US suing Meta, TikTok, Snapchat, and YouTube. And the lawsuits argue that these products were intentionally designed to be addictive, they've targeted youth for engagement, and that this has contributed to mental health harms, and that they've shifted the costs onto schools and communities managing youth mental health problems. And so a lot of these cases have been consolidated into a major multi-district litigation going on right now. And in New Mexico, it's the actual attorney general who brought this forward after an uncover investigation where they posed as a child online. And this is their statement is how they basically, these platforms have created a breeding ground for predators, allowing sexual exploitation and solicitation of minors, use algorithms to recommend harmful content, and fail to remove child sexual abuse material quick enough. These are basically the tobacco lawsuits over time. So the outcome of these lawsuits will have a significant impact on the future of these platforms and what it'll mean for our kids. And these are just a few of the quotes from documents that have been revealed during this trial. YouTube's key mission was to make YouTube feel less like a utility and more like an addictive experience, and that the goal was not viewership, that it was viewer addiction. How Facebook's researchers warned of 500,000 child exploitation cases per day on Facebook and Instagram platforms, and how they were knew that if they could hook people on Facebook at 11 years old, that they had almost four times the long-term retention than at 20 years old. And so they knew that these Instagram's been extremely harmful to young girls, and yet they continue to just focus on the monetization of these kids and not reducing the harms. So it's little wonder that the people who created these technologies keep it away from their kids. Someone again who works in technology, I take a very tech intentional approach with my kids because I understand how these products are built to be addictive. Steve Jobs didn't even allow his kids to have an iPad because he knew how dangerous it was for them. Ivan Spiegel, who's the CEO of Snapchat, he limits his kids' screen time to 1.5 hours per week. And even Bill Gates didn't allow his kids to have a smartphone until they were 14, and he wishes he waited till 16 or later. And puberty is such a critical time for vulnerability. It's their brain development, that prefrontal cortex that's responsible for decision making, impulse control, and self regulation is still maturing during adolescence. So exposure to addiction can have long-term effects. And that dopamine system, which regulates reward and pleasure, is particularly sensitive during puberty. And constant dopamine hijacking, it really hijacks that brain reward system. And adolescents are already in a heightened emotional state. And so these swings and hormonal changes are happening, and social media can amplify these emotions. And they're in a point of really forming their identity. And so the pressure to conform or to portray an idealized version of themselves online can stunt their development of a genuine self-concept. And adolescents are already highly influenced by their peers, and social media accelerates this by providing constant access to other people's opinions, likes, and activities. And luckily, governments are starting to recognize the impact social media is having on kids. There is literally dozens of countries around the world who are looking to follow Australia's lead in setting an age minimum for social media. Our Nova Scotia Liberals here tabled a bill back in the fall, but it was recognized that this really truly needs to be at the federal level. And so we have yet to really hear our government um, give details of what they're considering. And we hope to hear from them soon because many other countries around the world have had their leaders speak up very prominently that they're going to do something to protect their kids online and make change. And so it's really time for Canada to act. There's been whisperings that they're considering an age minimum of 14, which, we have been continuing to advocate that have to consider at least 16 because that's similarly to what many other countries around the world are looking at. And, Canada's largely been silent on this, so we really need our government to act. And so, Unplug Canada has been really center of the advocacy around this here in Canada. We put together a petition last summer that gathered thousands of signatures across Canada, and it was read in the House of Commons in October. And we've had dozens of meetings with MPs, with ministers and senators advocating for this. And so we'd ask if you feel compelled that this is something we need in Canada, please email your MP and ask them for their support in raising the age of social media to 16 and to put in place strong regulation that modernize our system to protect kids online. This has been really amazing to hear the feedback as we've talked with these government officials that they've never seen a movement like this that has engaged parents like this. Parents are typically pretty silent on issues, but this is one time where we've been able to get a lot of really strong voices, and your voice matters. So I please encourage you to email your MP because the more they hear from Canadians, the more likelihood this is going to come forward and our kids can be protected. And there is global support for raising the age of social media. Here in Canada, there was a poll done by Ipsos that showed that 84% of Canadians agree that kids should be at least 16 before accessing social media. And that's one of the highest in the world that Ipsos has done. So, there's strong support here. And the most recent poll showed 90% in favor of an age minimum for social media and um, other online harms bills to be included. And the young people who have lived through this, Gen Z, have a lot of regrets. 50% regret spending too much time on social media as kids, and nearly half of them wish that TikTok and Snapchat had never been invented. I don't know many things you can think of in your childhood that you actually truly wished had never been invented. And that's because these kids have seen the harms on themselves as well as their peers, and they wouldn't be on those platforms if they didn't feel like they had to be because everybody else is. And 57% of Gen Z surveyed support parents restricting children's access to smartphones until high school. And they even say themselves that when they have kids, they're not giving their kids smartphones or social media until at least 16 because they say that they grew up with regrets and they regret it. They grew up with this and they regret it. And now Gen Z was raised by the internet. And now Gen Alpha, which is many of our kids, is being going to be raised by the algorithm. And AI chatbots that have recently come into our lives and AI toys are not safe for kids. AI chatbots blur trust boundaries, they normalize adult conversations and explicit content, and they convince kids that they're real, that's their friend or their lover. And it becomes that always reaffirming friend who is always there, which is not a realistic expectation of your parents or your friends in your life. And unfortunately, these harms are very real and kids are paying the price. There's been a number of cases where kids have, initially started using ChatGPT for homework and then started to confide in it. And there's been a number of cases where ChatGPT has actually convinced the kid to take their life. There's also these character AI platforms that have role play AI chatbots. And again, there's been a number of kids who've been convinced that this AI chatbot is real and it's their lover, and they've taken their lives for it. And AI toys are talking about sex and Communist Party talking points. These things are not regulated, and we need quick action from our government to get a handle on this before it goes any further. So if you want to stay informed on the risks of social media, gaming, AI, I definitely recommend you consider following along Scrolling to Death. Nikki does an amazing job on her podcast, bringing on guests to, share the research, share the science, or unfortunately share very heartbreaking stories of parents who have lost their child or whose child has been harmed by these things. And it should be a real wake-up call for parents to pay attention to this. The next thing to consider is no devices in the bedroom. You can't see what goes on behind closed doors, and screens before bed disrupt sleep and the circadian rhythm. And make it a family rule, even for yourself. You'd be surprised the benefits that you will get by getting these devices out of the bedroom. And so keep them in a secure spot in your kitchen overnight, depending on whether you might need to actually lock it away or at least keeping it in a central spot where it becomes a family rule where everyone puts their devices there. It creates a family standard that prioritizes sleep and prioritizes giving your brain time to wind down from the day. And it's important that parents use parental controls on all devices in their house. It's not just for smartphones, it's for your smart TV, your gaming console, a laptop, your tablet, your router. It's important to understand what is available for parental controls and set some limits up, whether it's ensuring that they can't download apps without permission, blocking inappropriate sites, setting it so it's not accessible at night or during school, and setting time limits on apps and devices. And there's a number of different parental control options. If you're looking at a laptop or a smartphone at some point, there are some operating system controls that Google and iPhone offer. However, they are very difficult to navigate for most people. And at 13, they basically disappear because today the digital age of consent is 13. And so much of the control parents have disappears once the kid turns 13. So there are third party software on your router or something you can put on devices that can give parents more control and more visibility into their kids' online interactions. And there's even app blocking devices like Bloom and Brick, which can also be a great tool for adults. I have the Bloom myself, and it blocks certain apps during certain times of the workday, certain times of the evenings. And it's just that additional barrier to getting sucked into some of these products because even as adults, it's difficult. But parental controls are difficult to navigate. Even the most tech-savvy parents can struggle to manage these parental controls, and some of them require hundreds of settings to be changed to make them age appropriate. And so, even if you have parental controls on your device, it doesn't mean that their friends have it because 58% of teens say they've never had controls put on their phone, and 47% of teens say they can get around them. And that's again because many of the ones built into these devices by default are not built with kids and parents in mind. And so you need to be aware of the laptop, the gaming console, and the tablet because these devices truly can expose kids to the same kind of harms. Tablets give kids access, young kids access to YouTube, games, messaging, and AI platforms years before parents expect smartphone risks. So consider watching shows on a TV over a personal device when possible. And again, keep these devices, all the devices, out of the bedroom. And note that you cannot manage the parental controls on a school issued device. Kids often use the excuse to go take their school laptop into their bedroom to use it for homework when they may not be. And when you look at 1 in 4 has watched adult content on school, and 50% have watched porn on a school device. And already got 60% of kids under 4 have their own iPad. And gaming platforms are something to be aware of because gaming is definitely different than it was when we were kids. It's moved from being engaging and in person to isolating and alone. Canadian teens spend more than 18 hours a week gaming, which is basically a part-time job. And 41% of teen boys feel they spend too much time gaming, with 13 reporting gaming addiction. And 63% of child trafficking starts on gaming sites. I know Roblox is a game used from very young kids, and a lot of kids are playing it. But there has been so many reports coming out over the last year of how much of a problem it has with pedophiles using this to groom kids and then move them off of Roblox to other darker platforms, where then the abuse becomes more horrific. So don't underestimate some of these gaming platforms that seem innocent. Another thing is to consider creating no phone zones. So whether that's at family dinners, when friends and family are visiting, putting them away, on vacations, just focusing on being together and in the moment. When you're camping and outside, put them away. And again, try to bookend your days with like at least 1 hour before bed of not having your device. And consider being tech intentional. Tech intentional is a term coined by Emily Chirkin, who's a screen time consultant, that really means using screen-based technology that enhances, nurtures, and supports yourself, your child, or your family in a way that aligns with your values. But it's resisting and delaying or limiting screen use that interferes with healthy mental, physical, cognitive, and emotional development. So essentially, less is more, later's better in relationships and skills before screens. And so think about the three C's of technology use. Think about why they're using the tech. Are they creating? Are they using their brains actively to learn something new or develop skills? Are they connecting? Are they leveraging technology to build and connect relationships? Are they gaming together in an interactive way? Are they calling grandma on video chat? Or are they consuming? Are they consuming content to avoid boredom, taking away from sleep or social interactions? And think about how they're using the tech. Consider the location. Are they using devices in open spaces, supervised, or are they plugged into a personal device alone in their bedroom? And consider the medium. Watching content on TV in a room together is social, and it also reduces the risk of nearsightedness and neck issues compared to watching on a small device. And then consider the frequency and time. Again, occasional use for short periods of time provides exposure to tech without taking away too much time from other activities. And one thing I want to clarify is around stories. I think Jonathan Haidt does a really good job sort of explaining this difference. Storytime is movies, books, and TV shows that follow a coherent narrative arc. The structure engages our emotions, it builds suspense, and it fosters empathy and connection with those characters. And watching a film requires sustained attention, training the brain to focus and process information deeply versus fragmenting time. Short form content like TikTok, Reels, Shorts, they deliver these bite sized dopamine hits in seconds, training the brain to expect instant gratification. Scrolling activates the dopamine reward system, similar to slot machines, and it rewires the brain for constant novelty, making longer, more meaningful activities feel boring. and advocate for phone-free schools bell to bell. Because imagine you're in grade 7 and your mom or dad were packing your bag and they gave you your Walkman, your Discman with all your music, your TV with all your DVDs, your gaming console, some Pokemon cards, your digital camera with all your photo albums of you and your friends, your personal computer, and maybe even some porn. This is what it's like to give a child a smartphone and then send them to school. How can we expect them to pay attention or to want to engage with friends in real life when they have this in their pocket? And why this matters to schools. Teachers and staff see this daily. Anxiety, distraction, social comparison, cyberbullying, sleep loss. And Jonathan Haidt, again, the author of The Anxious Generation's biggest concern now after releasing the book is the destruction of attention could be one of the greatest losses of our times. Because attention is the new classroom currency. Average attention spans have dropped to 47 seconds on any task, down from 2.5 minutes in just 2004. And teachers worldwide now cite constant distraction as the number one classroom challenge. And just the presence of a smartphone, even turned off, measurably lowers attention and memory performance. And it really is these short form videos from TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram that trains the brain for rapid reward. These 5 to 10 second dopamine hits make sustained classroom focus feel really boring. And so in Nova Scotia, in at least grades pre-primary to grade 6, we do have a full bell-to-bell solution that came into effect about a year and a half ago, which is a great first step. However, in middle school and high school, the provincial policy today is basically at about a level 2, which means the phones just need to be kept in pockets and backpacks during class, but it's allowed during lunch hour, during breaks, during before and after school. And we really need to be moving up to a level 5 where these devices are locked away, either ideally in a central secure unit or at least for the entire day, all the way up to high school. And so, what happens when schools go completely phone free? We've seen some middle schools in Nova Scotia actually move forward with going further and doing a bell to bell policy. And what we hear in the testimonies from teachers and students is amazing. There's more socializing, interaction, and play. The classrooms and the hallways are loud with laughter and discussion. There's better focus and retention. There's feelings of more being more safe and less anxiety, and there's reduced behavioral issues and bullying. And so, we've seen some organizations in Canada start to really support Unplugged and what we're trying to do and advocate here. And Sturgeon Public Schools is one of the first school division actually in Canada to fully support Unplugged and officially partner with them. They have our pledge and some of our resources on their website. They're sharing it with their schools. They're hosting events in their schools. They are also even encouraging parents to sign the pledge to delay as early as, when they're registering for pre-primary. And, we've been lucky to have a number of conversations here in HRC in Halifax, where many of you may have found this event through your school newsletter, as we have created a bit of a partnership with them to share a little bit of a resource or an upcoming event in school newsletters every month. And so I've been really happy to hear reports of many principals utilizing that information and including it in their newsletters to try to help us reach more parents. And so, what you can do is if you have a child in a school that doesn't have a full bell-to-bell policy in middle school or high school, I'd encourage you to talk to the principal and advocate for it. We have Phone Free Schools, who is a movement here in Canada looking to help support more schools in actually moving forward with this. With Quebec having done this since September, there is a significant amount of positive feedback that has come out of what we're seeing in academic performance, student engagement, student attendance, reduction in bullying and behavioral issues. And the kids are just happier. And the testimonies are amazing. So we do have a petition that they're trying to gather here in Nova Scotia to advocate for the government to take the next step in the cell phone policy and introducing it into middle school and ideally high school. And so if you're interested, you can scan that QR code and reach out to Phone Free Schools if you're interested in learning more. And one of the most important things is this is not about taking everything away from kids, but giving them back something and giving them more free independence and free play in the real world. because kids need more time outside with age-appropriate risk-taking in order to learn independence and become self-governing. Because our kids truly are smarter, safer, and stronger than our culture gives them credit for. So there's this organization called Let Grow, and they have a whole bunch of resources online about helping parents sort of give the kids back more independence. They've got this neat little Let Grow experiment that teachers can send home where they ask kids to go home and talk to their parents and say they want to do something new that they've never done on their own, that they feel they can. Doesn't have to be huge. It could be climbing a tree, running an errand, or making a meal. The choices are endless, but the impact is immediate, and seeing their confidence grow with each one of those moments is incredible. And the last thing is to be a role model because your kid's relationship with technology will be shaped by yours. I personally have shifted a lot of my own relationship and norms with my technology use. And so I'll share a couple things that I have done in the last year or so to change my habits. So one is I've gone back to an analog watch, just a very basic $10 watch from Amazon. And I use that because I don't want a smartwatch that's going to give me more distractions. I want to be able to completely turn it off and put it down and not be distracted by it. I'm a lot more mindful of when I use my phone around my kids. So I try my best to keep it away and step out of the room if I need to actually look up something or answer something. But if I do need to have it out in front of them, I actually try to explain what I'm doing. I say, you know what, I'm looking up a recipe for dinner, or I'm messaging a friend at work who needs my help. Helping to them to see that it is a tool and it can be a tool is important. And it also holds yourself accountable to not be caught into some kind of doom scrolling as well. And get the phone out of the bedroom at night. This has been one of the biggest shifts I've seen personally is bookending my day without the device. So we lock it, we put it in a charger out in the kitchen. And I have had days, even just as the other day, when I'll wake up and it might go an hour before I even remember I have a phone. I literally get up and I'm showered and I've got the kids out the door, and I literally sometimes leave the house almost without my phone. My husband doesn't regularly because as soon as it's physically out of range, it is amazing how quickly you can actually forget it exists. And that's really empowering. And so I've also turned off all non-critical notifications. Basically, I only get notifications when a phone call comes in. I've moved all my social media apps either to a laptop only or into a folder on the second screen of my phone. So I'm trying to bury it and create that little bit of friction from when I unlock my phone. I don't see it sitting there and it's tempted to kind of click into it. And I put daily limits on social media. So I have 15 minutes, and I honestly very rarely hit that anymore. And I'd say before, I had no idea how much time I was spending on there. It could have been 10 minutes, it could have been 2 hours. But now I have these timers that also warn me for how long I've been on it. And so I find myself not even wanting to go there because it's just been able to kind of reduce slowly that time, and now I barely ever hit my limits. And I use Bloom or this brick as well to create those distraction-free times. So I actually have it locked during my workday. I can't get into some apps at certain parts of the day, the same thing. And it's again just really good to have that little bit of friction and preventing you from having to get caught in that doom scrolling. And a little tip is if you do use YouTube, is you can actually turn your history off, and that actually gets rid of YouTube Shorts. So it won't show you anything because it's actually not kind of considering and creating an algorithm for you. You basically see a blank screen and then you just can search for the video you want. And it just has, again, less temptations for you to get stuck in that platform. And make sure you talk to your kids. You'd be surprised how young you should start these conversations because it's not a matter of when, it's not a matter of if they're going to get exposed to potentially harmful content or have some kind of interaction that's inappropriate, it's when. And so kids younger and younger are seeing things that are highly inappropriate, whether it's on a friend's device or on a school device or somewhere else in an older friend or parent that you need to make sure you have these open conversations with them and they know that you're a safe space to go to. There's some great educational resources for youth that are accessible. The Amazing Generation, again, by Jonathan Haidt and Catherine Price, is really well written for that grade 4 to 8. And it is empowering so many kids to say, I don't want that. I don't want a device that's going to capture my attention, that's going to interfere with my friendships and my ability to pay attention. And so I'd highly recommend buying that book. There's number ones with brains and screens. The good pictures, bad pictures is different age level appropriate book about seeing pornography and inappropriate content online. And Smartphone Free Childhood US also does some great videos for kids. This one here is about a 10-minute video targeted to that preteen years that talks all about the kind of superpowers you can get if you delay a smartphone. And a couple other things you can do as parents is engage other parents. Reach out, have this conversation, share this video from this discussion tonight. Start a book club, read The Anxious Generation or The Amazing Generation, and discuss it together. Recommend they watch, Childhood 2.0, where there's a number of other documentaries out there on the harms of social media. And even Netflix has put out that drama, which is really largely based on a lot of real life events, The Adolescents, and it's really been impactful on the impact to boys of online and social media. And talk to your SAC or your PTA about raising awareness with parents in your school. Become a school champion, help bring awareness to your school, and tell them about Unplug Canada, our pledge, and events that they can join. And lastly, what are some of the benefits of delaying? If you delay smartphones and social media, kids are going to have better focus and enhanced creativity. They're going to have more emotional stability and stronger mental health, advanced social skills and empathy, increased independence and physical health. And the power of quality sleep improves alertness, mood regulation, and academic performance. I don't know one parent that wouldn't want this for their kids. And this is the way that we can give that to them. And so I've shared quite a bit of actions that you could take and to consider with your families. There's a lot in here, and I know I've shared quite a bit over the last hour. So don't let the perfect be the enemy of good. It may not be realistic to do all of these things, but maybe think about one change that you can make. Even if your child already has a smartphone, it's never too late to make some changes in your own relationship with technology and setting the example, and also with theirs, whether they're 2 years old or 20 years old. And so I encourage you to just think about, what resonated with you tonight. Where do you think you could see the first step you could take and take that first step? And so thank you for listening tonight, for joining us. Again, sign the pledge if you want to delay smartphones. Go to our website, unplugcanada.com. Share it with others in your community. If you do want to follow along, we do have an Instagram and Facebook page that our local chapter puts out content that again helps educate and stay up to date on the latest information and resources that are available for parents to navigate this with their families. And we do have an upcoming event that's going to be happening next Thursday on March 5th. And it is responding to technology facilitated harms among young people. It's with Dr. Alexa Dodge, who's an associate professor with the Department of Criminology in St. Mary's University. She's one of the leading researchers on this topic. And she's going to be sharing some really informative tools again and techniques to navigate this with your kids when it comes to things like sextortion and cyberbullying and sharing intimate images. So if you're looking for a session specifically on that topic, this is going to be a really incredibly useful one. And so I'll share after this some details on the registration link for that. And if you're interested in getting involved or have questions, please reach out to us at ns@unplugcanada.com. We'd love to hear from more parents and how we can help empower you to get this moving in your community and help us change the norm. Thank you. So I will open it up to questions. We kind of hit it right on the hour for sort of the presentation part. And if folks have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and come off mute or pop them in the chat there, and I'm happy to kind of address it as we go. But if there's anything anybody wants to ask, please don't be shy. Yeah, some of the risks of YouTube. I can definitely share a little bit of that. So I'd say one of the first things is that, YouTube definitely can have a ton of really amazing content that, is where you can learn a new skill or learn a new topic. But with the introduction of things like YouTube Shorts, it's basically got the same kind of content as TikTok. And many influencers and content creators push their content across all these platforms. And so that's one of the risks right there as far as the addictive nature of these videos, and again, the fragmenting of attention. The other thing I'd say is if the child actually has an account and they're posting videos, they are subjected to potentially comments, messages from strangers who might be inappropriate, might be harmful, just might be tough for them to sort of read. Again, kind of hitting on their confidence. And then, unfortunately, it is very easy to find pretty inappropriate content on there. And again, if you saw the stat where, like, if you just search something a little bit about maybe dieting or something along that realm, all of a sudden, like, the algorithm takes over and it just feeds more. These algorithms aren't ill-intended. They are just literally feeding what they're intended to do, which is to give the person more of what it thinks that they want to see. And unfortunately, much of the most engaging content is sometimes the most harmful and sometimes the most inappropriate. So hopefully that gave you a little bit of more information on YouTube, but I would say there are some tools out there again that you can limit things like YouTube Shorts. You can limit again if you just don't allow them to have their own account, then they won't get sucked into the algorithm. So that's a couple things that you can kind of think about there. Okay, another question about resources that might assist older children who have addiction, behavior, and phone use. So there's one resource I want to share. I can find where I put it, but it is actually a book called The Family Smartphone Guide. It's from a Canadian author, and it is kind of the driver's manual of smartphones. And again, and actually, it's kind of similar if you could think about, the target audience for the amazing generation is kind of grades 4 to 8, but then this one's probably more 9 to sort of grade 12, where it is written in a slightly higher age level that talks about, the impacts of smartphones, how they're built to be addictive, what kind of things they might experience online, and why they should be wanting to do more things in person and the benefits it has. So that might be a good resource to have. It's again the smartphone family guide, if I recall. I swear I had the book around here a minute ago, but I don't know where I put them. But we can share that out as a resource afterwards. And there's also some, depending on the age group, there's a few other things I can share afterwards, maybe. But there's like better screen time. There's screens and kids that they have like middle school or kind of kids who are almost like that 1920. Again, the Gen Zs have kind of lived through it, and they talk about how they have so many regrets. And I find, again, hearing sometimes the experience of somebody who's a little bit more like their peer than hearing it from a parent just sometimes resonates a little bit more with that age group where they truly can talk or feel like they're talking or hearing from somebody who's been through it and is still kind of a kid or a youth in their eyes. And that tends to maybe just reach them a little bit easier. All right. Um, Are schools aligned? I know they use screens most of the time, presentations, movies, iPads for awards. How will they adapt in the future? This is a great comment. I think that I hope that we will continue to see maybe a bit of an evolution on how screens are incorporated into the classrooms as well. Obviously, again, there's lots of opportunities where these devices can be seen as a tool. But and many folks that I know who are in the classroom, they come also with a lot of opportunities for kids to get into things that they shouldn't be and distractions. And so, I think that, we again saw a bit of a culture shift where there was a lot of excitement about these devices and the technology and how it was going to make our kids like so tech savvy and the future tech leaders of the world. But one thing I think people forget is it's different to teach kids through a device versus teach kids like how devices are built or like the true like engineering and computer science of it. So they're not the same thing. A kid that, just seeing like a 2-year-old who can navigate an iPad is no indication of their ability in the future to, lead a tech company in the future or be somebody in that space. It's probably actually going to be quite the opposite. So It's, I'd say something that is, I'm sure, going to continue to evolve as more of society evolves in their homes and with other policies that might come in place with legislation. But I think that there's definitely an opportunity for our schools to just continue to think about how these devices are incorporated into classrooms. We're seeing countries like, I believe it's Sweden, who is was literally the most tech forward country over the last decade or so. They spent significantly on introducing it in the classrooms, and they have very recently completely removed it from classrooms. They have gone back right back to pen and paper and computer labs versus one-to-one devices. And I think we're going to continue to see a little bit more of that. Um, yes, I do have the book strategically in the background for anybody. That's maybe where one of my books was. Yeah, the Family Smartphone Guide. Thanks, Stephanie, for sharing that. Thanks, Sarah. Um, Child brings the school laptop home from most of the home device are monitored and time and but school laptop you can browse on YouTube. Yeah, yeah. This is the thing that is challenging when I've heard a lot of parents whose kids have a school issued device. You just have less control over what they can access. And that is just something for parents to be aware of. Obviously, the schools have put things in place to try to, you know, eliminate the ability for kids to access it. But that is, again, whether it's a school device or a device at home, that is a very difficult thing to completely plug all the holes because these devices from Apple and Google are just not built with kids in mind. They are not built, unfortunately, yet to truly fully protect in every way. So just something that parents just need to be aware of. Um, Awesome. Thanks, Lauren, for the comments. Oh yeah, Vanessa. There's the the Euro router. Those are great too. Yeah, that you can definitely through many routers these days, you can have an ability to set up blocking and blocking sites. So that again, any device, whether it's even a visiting child, would be blocked if they're on your Wi-Fi. Um, Yeah, so Stephanie shared that her RCE has said that some of the safeguards in Chromebooks only work within the school's network. So maybe something to consider as well with when you're at home, that just because there's some protections there at school, that you really want to consider your home environment as well and how you can kind of put those protections in place. It is unfortunately, again, exhausting. That's why I think many more people are just pushing and considering delaying because as soon as you have that device, it's a lot of work to try to maintain it. And then literally in families across the world, the number one thing that families are fighting about is screen times and many times these phones. So as soon as they're introduced, it just changes the family dynamic. And you just need to be aware that as soon as that comes into their lives, not every child, obviously some kids just naturally might have better self-control and they're not kind of sucked into it as much, but many kids are, and you don't really know until they have it. And every kid, even in the same family, can have a different natural sort of relationship with technology. Some may be a little bit more prone to being sucked into it versus some may just naturally not care and have built more resilience around that. Any other questions? This is really great. I appreciate the comments. Yeah, I appreciate Sarah, the note. Hopefully folks, yeah, took something away and, have been able to consider something. It's a lot. I'm sure I know I went through a lot in an hour and it can be overwhelming, but really the hope was just to try to, share as much as we could and try to educate more parents on this situation so you can take that and make decisions in your own family. So we will follow up this evening with the recording in the next day or so, and a few key resources that I had mentioned kind of throughout the presentation that might be helpful. And if anybody has any questions or again wants to get involved or wants to bring these conversations and champion the pledge in their school, reach out. We have all kinds of examples and stories of success that we can share that folks have had in bringing this to their communities and to their schools. So yeah, if there's nothing else, we can end it here. Thank you, Emily, for emailing your MP. I will put that last little plug in there. It takes just a moment, but even just sending them a quick email, your local MP, that you want them to support an age minimum of 16 and other protections for kids on these devices, because it doesn't necessarily end at 16, because even when they get it, there should be a similar to driving, a bit of a graduated license where they're not exposed to some of the addictive algorithms or some of the more harmful features of those products until they become an adult, when they then at that point can make decisions. And I think we could all hope that at some point, this is something that we have here in Canada. Yeah, Emily, do you have a quick question? Yeah. Question on, wanting to go on a smartphone to check sports scores. That's it, it's a tough one, right? I mean, I think if it's just seen as, if they truly are looking at it for that information, I don't see harm in that. I think it's probably, what else is that where they stop and they hand it back, or do they then start to get into other things? Are you monitoring them while they're on that phone? I would say, what I've been doing a lot, honestly, is I've been just using my laptop a lot more. Whenever my kids want to look up something, whenever we want to watch a trailer for a movie we're going to have on Friday night, whenever we're going to, video chat grandparents, I bring out the laptop a lot more. It's a bigger screen. It's not so small. They can't navigate it and get into other things as if they could if they were on a phone. So I've just found, using my laptop a lot more has just really helped in sort of, again, pushing them more to like, this is a tool, and laptops and computers, I still feel like there's a tool aspect of that. And so that's something that you could consider. Let's see what else. Yeah, Lynn, I know you're just mentioned as a parent of older teen, young adults who still worry about their use. I can imagine it's tough, and yeah, like I said, it doesn't end at 16 or even 18. It's something that is is difficult, and again, there's just like more we're learning. This is something that I think the whole world has been trying to figure out over the last while, and at least now I'm glad there's more open conversations happening. Um, Thanks, Jordan. If any of your kids have Messenger Kids, this is a feature where you can see what they are texting. Yes, I'm not as familiar with Messenger Kids. My kids don't have that just yet, but I do believe that that is, yeah, one of the ways in which they can have some messenger, and that you can usually have that more on a laptop as well, and you can see what they're texting, similar to some other devices as they get older. There is opportunity for you to actually monitor a little bit more of the activity, or be flagged and notified if there's concerning cyberbullying happening, and what have you. Um, yeah, and I know Bethany just mentioned, yeah, online gambling. That is another topic I think I'm going to start to have to add into these presentations, is actually becoming quite a concern. And there's, again, I think legislation potentially coming to look more at that, because yeah, there's, even when you look at things as simple as Robux in Roblox, like that is literally starting to like gamify these devices in a monetary way, that starts to create some of that element of it. So yeah. Um, all right. Any other questions? Okay. Well, again, thanks everybody for coming on tonight. I wish we could have had some of us in person who were planning to be there in person. But again, there's the event next Thursday if folks want to join. I'll share some of that registration details in the follow-up email from this as well. And, we're going to continue to try to do these at least like, a couple times a year, and continue to have the conversation. And if anyone's looking to, bring this to their school and even maybe present themselves if they're in other parts of Nova Scotia or around the country, reach out, because we're looking at getting a short version of the presentation that people could present within their own schools. And we also have a 15-minute recording of just what Unplug Canada is that we've just recently created for people to sort of be able to share again with their schools or with their parent communities, that tries to sort of just help with the reach. So thanks again, everybody. I hope you have a great night, and we will share some follow-ups after this.